Hi, I'm here with David, and we're going to talk about mass media, journalism, and news. How has news evolved to include citizen journalists? Because we hear this concept a lot now, especially on social media platforms such as Facebook and Twitter, among other viral forms of information transmission.
Well, you've invited me here. I'm a traditional journalist, so I'm just going to say that I do not like the term citizen journalist. I think the two words don't really go together. Now, I think there are some citizens who could probably do journalism, but just putting out information does not make you a journalist. And we can talk a little more about what I think makes a journalist, but certainly anybody who wants to can gather information and put it out on a Facebook page or on a website or in a YouTube video, and they can reach an audience that way. But there are things that we as journalists do, and there are practices that we hold to that I think set us apart from citizens. And so I think what you get from a traditional journalist is different from what you get from a citizen journalist, and it always will be. And maybe we can talk some more about what a journalist is.
What other skills would you say that journalists bring to the table that we still need?
Just to touch on one more thing that I think is really important, and that is ethics. We do have ethical standards for what we do, and I think that those are internalized by working in a newsroom with other journalists and holding each other to high standards. And ethics are something that has flown out the window in some news outlets that I think it makes it harder for all of us when you see some, for example, journalists on TV, barging into people's doors and trying to get statements from people whose, for example, a family member has just died or something. I mean, many of us would never do that. And so I think the standards, the ethical standards that we hold are the most important piece.
So do news media, in your opinion, have a changing and perhaps added responsibility to some extent to include the lay public in journalism practices these days?
We have, over the course of my career, reached out, and we do incorporate the public in ways that we never did before. I mean, for one thing, I think we're a lot more interactive. It's far more likely these days that we will ask people what they think a good story is, or what experience they've had with something, and we will use that in our reporting. We certainly use social media right now tremendously, to ask people to give us feedback about what we're doing and to give us a sense of what they see the news as. So sometimes we might put out a question, has such and such happened to you? And we'll ask people to let us know what they think, and we'll incorporate that. We might put out a question about politics, tell us about how you're going to vote in the election and why, and we incorporate those. And we try to have the reports that we produce kind of reflect back the public in ways that that was harder to get at before, I think. All these same tools that we use are also tools we can use to interact with the public, and I think we're doing that.
How do journalists think about the ethics of what they do?
Well, if you're a trained professional journalist, I hope at some point in your career you've been indoctrinated with a code of ethics of some kind. In my case, I've always been a follower of the Society of Professional Journalists Code of Ethics, and it kind of has 4 parts to it. The first part is seek truth and report it, and that is do what journalists have always done, do it with integrity. Don't mislead the public. Don't do anything that would cast any doubt about the report that you're getting. Number 2 would be to minimize harm, and by that I mean, don't do things in your reporting or in your writing that would get somebody in trouble, that would cause harm to somebody. For example, when we write about crime victims, we often don't identify them. We don't want to cause problems for them. And I think that's more important than ever because it's now possible to get information about crime victims from other places. And there are lots of examples of how unfiltered information can be a problem. We also need to act independently. And by that I mean we need to avoid conflicts of interest or the appearance of conflicts of interest. We shouldn't take gifts. We shouldn't do anything that would cast any doubt on our credibility as reporters. If you work for a news outlet that takes advertisements, there should be no link between the advertising and the news. I think all those things are part of our requirement to be independent. And then finally, we have to be accountable and transparent. And by that I mean, if we make a mistake, we need to own up to it. We need to correct it. We need to involve citizens in how we do our jobs. We need to talk more about what the story behind the story is. And I think you've seen many news outlets where an editor or an ombudsman or somebody will describe how a story came together and talk about the decisions that were made by the reporters. We need to do that as much as we can so that the mystique of news gathering is taken off. I mean, to me, news gathering is shoe leather, it's bootstraps, it's just going out and pounding the pavement, to use a lot of cliches, to get the story. And there's no substitute for that. And people should not ever get the idea that there's any magic to it or that there's anything secret that we don't want them to know.